welcoming to the show the executive director of the Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy sits down with us. Jim, it's good to see you again. How are you today?
Yeah, good to be here, man. Good to see you again.
So we kind of talk about this as the kickoff to the season. We start really diving into what's going to happen. But your season really never ends. You just transition from the Senior Bowl to preparing for next year's class and evaluating players probably as quickly as you can.
We do. Our staff actually started watching this year's group back in January because once we have the game set for that year, there's no sense spinning our wheels keep watching those guys. So we've been moved on. I'm still playing a lot of catch up. I've been doing a lot on the business side of our operation with sponsorships and stuff. So I'm way behind on tape. But we're going to be putting out our watch list on August 21st, which is a big deal for us. Gets a lot of traction. And we're going to have over 700 players on that thing this year because it's the last year of the extra COVID year for the players. So kind of a bloated list. I don't love having that many guys on it, but yeah, it's going to be a big draft class this year.
Yeah, what has that done to the depth of talent? These extra, like Tennessee's bringing back an eighth-year senior in Keenan, Pili, and then Cooper Mays. He was on your list a year ago, but he decided to play another season of college football.
A bunch of these guys, Brew McCoy. I mean, most of these guys we looked at last year. Spragans. I mean, I feel like all of them we watched a year ago. It's what it's done. It's going to make for a really deep draft. So far, what I would say the takeaways from this year's class are, like, I don't think it's going to be great up top. I think it's going to be a bottom-heavy draft. Like, a lot of the guys you're seeing in mock first-round drafts right now, we've graded. They're not first-round picks. I'm not saying they can't get there, not saying because they do get better. They have another year in the weight room and working with the coaching staffs and whatnot. But if we drafted today, I don't think many teams would have first-round grades on many players in this draft. But last year, like, we had a lot of day 3 guys go back to school. So I think day 3 is going to be loaded. I think you're going to see a lot of guys rounds 5 through 7 make football teams a year from now, make 53-man rosters. But again, I don't think high end. There's a lot of high end talent in this year's draft.
Jim, we've seen Tennessee be successful offensively with Josh Heupel and his system and what he's been able to do so far. We've also experienced opposing fan bases and coaches try to knock the offensive system for recruiting purposes. What are the scouts looking at to see, all right, these players are playing in Heupel's offense. Does it translate to the next level? What are they looking at?
Well, first and foremost, Coach Heupel doesn't have to be concerned about, what carries over and what doesn't. And but negative recruiting happens. Shoot. They talk about coaches. Saban said it as he was leaving Alabama. He said, you know what, like this year-to-year thing with how long am I going to coach, like schools started to use that against us. So, there's questions. Is it apples to apples, like going from that system to the NFL playing quarterback? No, it's not. But there's you'd say that for a lot of college systems. So, when I look at the quarterback position, you can throw away about 85 to 90% of the throws in college anyway. And all you're looking is for the chaos throws, that when the pockets, scrambled and guys got to get out, move, slide, and then if they're throwing into tight windows. I mean, you look at some of these college offenses, most of the time these receivers are running wide open. So you're looking at the throws where they got to fit it in a tight space. So again, I don't care what system they're playing in college. I mean, you're really boiling it down to those situations. It's really situational football. What do they do on 3rd and long? What do they do in red zone? That's going to happen. You have success like they've had at Tennessee. Opposing teams are going to try to find ways to knock you on the recruiting trail. So, again, I don't think Coach Heupel needs to be worried about any of that. I'm sure he's not.
We're talking to Jim Nagy. He's the executive director of the Senior Bowl, sitting down with us at SEC Media Days. It's the Senior Bowl. You're now inviting underclassmen.
Juniors.
Yeah. So James Pierce Jr., he's a guy that he's got 1 year left, and then he's going to go to the draft. What do you see from him from a talent standpoint? What do you maybe want to see next in his probably final year of college football?
Yeah, it's last year was the first year we could bring any junior. Before that it was it's guys that had graduated. So it's good for our game. I mean, it helped us last year. We had 110 players drafted, which was our best year we've had. It was 43% of last year's entire draft class played in our game. So it helped, and it's helped on the high end. We had 10 first-round picks and all that. So James is back to James and not hyping up our game. But, no, he's a high-end athlete. He's a really good athlete. He's loose. He's athletic to play off the ball linebacker. He's a little bit of a tweener. And I haven't seen his body type. I look forward to seeing him this fall and see what he really looks like when you get up on him physically. And but really good athlete, explosive, fast, really cool mover. So he's similar to Harold Perkins, who's the guy who just walked past us a second ago from LSU. Those guys are pretty similar in my mind. So anytime you can get to the quarterback, you're going to get looked at heavily from the NFL. So, he's going to be one of those guys starting off the year that everyone's going to be looking at.
Do you have a trip planned to Knoxville again? I know in the past you've been here, talked to the team, and I'm pretty sure that's been really beneficial for the players.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I do or not. We're hiring a scout. We haven't announced our scouting staff, but we're going to have a scout in Knoxville this year. He's a guy that's been with the New England Patriots the last 4 or 5, 6 years. So we'll have someone right there. So we'll have a presence at a lot of games. He'll be seeing a lot of games, doing a lot of SEC teams out of Knoxville. So we will have a presence at a ton of games. Not sure if I'm going to get up there because, again, we don't have quite the budget that these NFL teams do. We got to watch our pennies a little bit of where we're going. But it's going to be great having someone right there in your backyard.
Has Tennessee's increased success in recent years, is that part of the reason? Have you seen more talent come into the program to make it worthwhile to have a scout in Knoxville?
Well, it just worked out that way. So,
Okay.
We hire our staff every year with guys that were in the NFL. And so we reshuffle the deck almost every year. And this individual just got let go by the Patriots this past year in kind of a regime change. And, my dad was a high school coach. So when I wanted to get into scouting, he's like, Jim, you work in football long enough, you're going to lose your job. Like, that just happens. I mean, I got caught up in a regime change in Kansas City and ended up in Seattle was my next job. But, I mean, that's what happened to this guy. So he's a good scout. He's got a great reputation. But when a new GM comes in, they want to bring in their own people. So, he reached out to me, and I knew about him. I got some friends up in New England that spoke really highly. So we are really excited to have him on board.
Jim Nagy is with us. He's the executive director of the Senior Bowl. To Swain asking about the offense and how players are evaluated. They have a newcomer in Chris Brazzell. So you mentioned Brew McCoy if you wanted to add thoughts on him. But Brazzell coming in as a transfer, stepping up in level of competition in the SEC. Thoughts there too? Yeah,
if Brew wouldn't have gotten hurt, he probably would have had an invite to our game last year. All of our wide receivers got picked except for one. So, I mean, that tells you what we thought of him. I mean, he was certainly a draftable guy. We love his game. He's big. He's physical. Love the skill set. So hopefully he comes back and he's healthy. And then the Tulane player, Brazzell, I was at like 3 games last year. We had their quarterback, Michael Pratt, in our game. We had one of the receivers, Jaquan Jackson, who the Titans picked. And Brazzell lit it up in a couple of games I was at. So that was a good ad for those guys. I'll be really curious to see what it looks like now in an SEC football field.
When you look at the NFL draft and you have a quarterback-heavy draft like we just had, is it safe to say the next year it's an opportunity for a defensive player to be maybe selected first overall?
Yeah. I mean, you look at this year's draft, not just having 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12 knocks a lot of good defensive players down. The first defensive player picked this year was at 15 overall to the Indianapolis Colts. Leatu Latu is a guy we had in the Senior Bowl. So, I mean, it's crazy. The first 14 picks were offensive players. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect that to happen again this year. I think we'll see it'll probably be a little more defensive heavy up top. But, yeah, I would think so. I think there's going to be a good chance. There's a corner at Michigan who's Will Johnson's a really good player. Not to be long-winded, I would think there would be a couple defensive guys up top.
Jim, what is Oklahoma and Texas bringing in immediately from a talent standpoint? When you look at those two teams, two proud programs, right? What do you see with those two teams right now?
Yeah, both really talented. I think you start at Texas. It's too bad they lost Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat to the National Football League because that would have helped their transition into this league, a bigger, more physical league in the trenches. They would have they could. You ask Coach Sark, they could have used those two guys this year, making them move to this league, but. You start with Quinn Ewers, but they've got good skill people. Isaiah Bond was a big transfer they got from Alabama. That guy can play. So they're going to be good offensively. Defensively, they lost some pieces. They got a bunch of young guys playing, so we'll see what that looks like. And then Oklahoma, they're always good on the offensive line. We've had 1 million of their offensive linemen in the Senior Bowl. But they're young as well. They got a couple defensive players. I mean, really the linebacker, and I'm blanking on his name. He's going to be here at the SEC Media Days this week. Really good player. Billy, I'm thinking of Bowman, their safety. Billy Bowman's a really good player.
Stutzman's coming.
Danny Stutzman. Yeah, gosh, I was just talking to his agent the other day. So they've got some pieces on defense. I would say Texas on offense, Oklahoma on defense when it comes to the draft. But now that they're in this league, they're going to be able to recruit more in the SEC footprint, get more SEC guys from the Mississippis, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, Georgia. They're going to be able to come in the SEC backyard and take players. So it'll only get better for those schools.
With the transfer portal, you just mentioned speaking to one of the players' agents, and they're already in college. It's just kind of weird to kind of get used to that. But when you are evaluating the character of a player, the players that are hitting the portal and team hopping, does that impact their draft status at all?
Jason, that's a good question. I get asked that a lot. Like, what's the impact of transfer portal and NIL? Like, for the portal, it's actually made the NFL's job a little easier, because now rather than going into a school and only having like one building full of people that know these players, now you in most cases two or three. I mean, hopefully not three. Hopefully you're not transferring a couple times. One transfer is fine. I think we all understand why guys transfer nowadays, but now you just got more sources. You got more people to talk to, so and that helps you figure the players out. So from the NFL's perspective, it's certainly not a bad thing. It's like that you know more about their character, and then you actually know more about them on the field too, because a lot of times guys are transferring to get in a new situation, getting a new offense, getting a new defense, be used differently. So you've probably seen guys do more on a football field than you would if they were just locked into one program, one scheme for 4 years.
Man, that's interesting. Jim Nagy, we'll get you out of here, but I want to ask you about one more Tennessee guy, Omar Norman-Lott. He's another player that he could have gone, decided to come back for one more year. What do you think about him, and then how does that affect how you evaluate Tennessee's defensive line with him coming back and James Pierce, who we talked about earlier?
Yeah, he's a guy we really liked last year. Again, we've done a lot of work on these guys, and the hard part last year was like a lot of guys went back. Guys we were hoping to get in last year's game. So yeah, Norman Lott's a good player. It's going to be a better D-line class than last year. And last year's class was pretty good. We had a couple first-round defensive linemen. I think we had 3 D linemen go in the first round, but this is a deep group. And across the board, SEC's got a bunch of them, as they always do. But Norman Lott's a guy that we liked a year ago, and again, he should come back better. So we're excited to see him.
Anything you want to plug? You started to plug and then got away from it with the Senior Bowl. Plug away.
No, we all we can plug is our numbers, right? Like, that's why everyone asks, like, before the draft, like, how'd you guys do this year? I'm like, well, we'll see on draft day. That's really how because that's all you can tell these players is how many guys you had picked. So to us, the key now, we had 45 of the top 100 players. So it's one thing to have guys drafted. It's another to have them drafted up high. We want star power on our game. We want difference makers in our game, and we're able to get that. We've been able to get that the last few years. So hopefully this thing just keeps building on itself.
Well, Jim, we always appreciate the time you give us. Always love talking football with you. Thank you for sitting down with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back on. It's always great.